Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, coming to you 6 days a week as we interview whitetail experts and hear their traditions and personal stories of the hunt. Learn more about the latest gear, discover proven tips, and the latest strategies so you can make your next hunt a success. Now, here's your host, Bruce Hutchin.
Whitetail Rendezvous is pleased to announce a partnership with GoHunt.com. Who's GoHunt.com? Well, if you're a DIY hunter, you need the information at GoHunt.com/insider. Why? Because it provides 4,200 profiles, every unit, every species, and every season. Furthermore, they give in-depth analysis, interactive maps, unit access, and seasonal trends. Draws are very important, and they give you the most accurate information in the business. All this is available when you go to GoHunt.com/insider. Make sure you use promo code WR when you join Insider. You'll get a $50 gift card for GoHunt.com Gear Shop. Remember, when you become a member of GoHunt.com/insider, you're going to get a $50 gift card to Go Hunt Gear Shop. What's in the gear shop? The best gear that you can buy for hunting the West. All in all, if you're hunting out West in 2018, GoHunt.com/insider is where you need to be to get all the research information. When you use promo code WR, Whitetail Rendezvous receives a small commission from GoHunt.com. Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous. This is your host and executive producer, Bruce Hutchin. And we're heading down to Kentucky. Yes, Kentucky, and that's not a secret anymore, folks. And we're going to talk with Josh Honeycutt. Now, Josh is the associate editor for Realtree.com. Josh, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Bruce. I appreciate you having me on. It's an honor.
Hey, we talked 10 or 15 minutes, and we should have been recording that whole thing because it would have been a heck of a show. But we're going to deep dive into how you got to where you are today, and we're going to just start off with Realtree.com. And tell us how you got connected with those folks.
Well, I'll try to make a long story as short as possible. It all started whenever I was in high school. I knew, I guess it started before that. I've been in the outdoors ever since I was able to walk, it seems like, doing some sort of outdoor activity involved in the outdoors in some way or another. I credit my father and my grandfather for introducing me to the outdoors. And it's been a pretty cool journey. I got into high school when I started thinking about careers, and I wanted to, figure out what I wanted to do. And I really wasn't sure what that was, but I knew that I wanted to be in the outdoors as much as possible. And I found the outdoor industry, as so many others have as well. And, I tried to match up what my strengths were to my passion, to figure out what that career could potentially look like. And, for me in high school, that was English, that was language arts, writing, media type things. I really loved to work with video. And, that kind of led to a career in the outdoors. It started out, I started trying to freelance write whenever I was a senior. And it was tough. It took about a year to get published. I probably received about 20 or 30, maybe 40 rejection letters before I finally got published in a magazine. And it was Kentucky Outdoors, a local magazine that we used to have here in the state. And, it just kind of snowballed from there. But I started a year or two after that, I started freelance writing for Realtree.com. Will Brantley, who's now with Field and Stream, was the editor for Realtree.com at that time, and I was doing a lot of freelance writing for him for the website, and that's kind of how I got introduced to them. And it just kind of snowballed from there. I was able to write for a lot of other publications for such as Field and Stream, Outdoor Life, North American Whitetail, Whitetail Journal, bowhunting.com, a lot of great websites and magazines that are very prominent in the industry. I was very blessed with opportunities to write for those, and which essentially led to a career, a job with the NWTF. I worked as their communications specialist down in South Carolina for a couple of years, and then I was offered a job opportunity with Realtree, and obviously I was honored to take that, accept that position, which is where I am now. I'm the associate editor and deer hunting editor for Realtree.com, and basically I kind of head up any kind of deer hunting, big game hunting, bow hunting, some gun hunting, and any kind of land management type content on Realtree.com, whether that's writing, whether that's video content, whatever the media is, that's kind of what I do.
And I appreciate that. When at Realtree.com in the deer hunting realm that you're in charge of, What's the number one question people query you guys?
Well, in regards to just general hunting
Yeah,
content, hunting
anything to do
skills,
with deer hunt, whitetail deer hunting.
well, it's really a broad range of questions that we get. I guess probably the most popular, which makes sense to me, is all the DIY type content. People who want to learn how to do things, how to be successful, how to kill big deer, or how just simply how to kill a deer, and do it on a budget, and do it DIY style, which is me. That's kind of who I am, and that's probably the number one question as far as just general topics that we get.
You talk about DIY and everybody. There's a number of heads up on the wall behind Josh, and for the most part, those are all DIY deer, correct?
Yeah, these are all of DIY deer here behind me, all Kentucky deer. I've got another room with with Kentucky deer and some other states as well. But all these right here behind me are all Kentucky and all DIY. Yes, sir.
What's the number one? Let's give three things to our listeners saying, man, I want to be a successful DIY hunter. I've killed a few bucks, but I'm not consistently killing bucks in multiple plots or multiple timber. So, what would you tell them?
Well, when it comes to hunting, the DIY hunter hunts a lot of new ground. And I guess what I mean by that, it takes a lot of time to find the right place. I would rather have 20 or 30 acres of land that has the right configuration of habitat, has all the right circumstances surrounding it than I would a 250 or 300 acre farm that has lesser habitat or doesn't have the right configuration of components that you need in order to have a good piece of ground for deer hunting. And it takes time to find that. So I guess the first thing I would say is, and it's kind of cliche, but I would say scout way more than you hunt. It takes a lot of time and effort to find a good place to go deer hunting, especially if you're in the market for big bucks, which is not what it's all about for me. I love just getting in the outdoors, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't like to shoot a big deer every now and then. So, the first thing is you've got to learn how to find the right ground, whether that's private, whether that's public. Either way, it's really the same, whether that you're a private land hunter or a public land hunter. So, and there's a lot of that goes into that. You have to scout both in the field. You have to scout digitally. There's enough, a plethora of tips that we could throw out there as far as how to get that ball rolling. But really, it depends on the first thing you need to do is decide whether you want to hunt there at home or whether you want to hunt out of state. And if you want to hunt there at home or out of state, the first step is to call the DNR. Call the DNR, pull some stats. Figure out where the biggest deer are coming from, figure out where the most deer are coming from, figure out where the least hunters are at. Because I will say this, I've found some pretty good success over the years hunting spots that weren't necessarily where the biggest bucks were coming from in the state, but it had the least hunter concentration, which can lead to some really good pockets of untouched ground that also produce big deer. So that's kind of really, you got to scout digitally. You got to use, and there's a lot of different maps that I use whenever I'm trying to find the right. I'll use aerial maps, topo maps. I'll use a lot of these the maps that these trophy or big game records companies like Pope and Young and Boone and Crockett that they put out. I'll look at those maps. I'll look at agricultural maps to figure out where the hot pockets or the big pockets of ag are located. There's all these different types of maps that you can use, and basically you think of it in layers. And you take that aerial map and then you slap another layer on it, and you slap another layer on it, and it kind of really paints a picture and helps you determine, okay, these are the areas that I want to focus on. And once that happens, and you've kind of narrowed it down to however many, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever the number is, until you find the spot you want to hunt. Narrow it down digitally, and then get in the field and start scouting. Because even though we have the digital age and we have all these great useful tools, and very important tools, I might add, you still got to get boots on the ground.
When you hit a new piece of ground that you've done all the background work, all the digital work, and maybe even looked at hard maps and all that, and so you got 2 or 3 places within 100 miles of your home, let's just say, you know, what are you looking for? What's the first thing you're going to do on those 3 properties?
Well, every situation is different, but for me personally, I like to do all of that boots on the ground, or most of that boots on the ground work right now. I like to do it from January to June. I don't like to invade places that I'm going to be hunting, and I don't like to invade places that other people are going to be hunting either, because I don't want to mess anybody else up. I want to respect other hunters as well. So I traditionally, unless it's just a rare instance or a special case, I don't like to get in the field and do a whole lot of boots on the ground scouting. Don't like to do a whole lot of invasion, except for from from January to June, and more specifically, I like to do it from January to about March. So as soon as you figure out where those properties are located, that you want to focus on, and where you want to home in on, just get out there, scout those properties. There's a lot of things that you want to look for. Obviously, you want to look for deer signs. It's again, that kind of sounds cliche, but that's the best indication if you're, unless you just put up trail cameras and do a lot of scouting from afar or glassing and stuff like that. The number one way to figure out if there are deer living there or not is to look for sign. That's tracks, that's rut sign that's left over from the fall. That's it's a number of things. But I like to get out there and I like to see first and foremost if there are deer there, because not every property is going to have deer, and not every property is going to have big deer. So you got to first and foremost figure out if deer are there. Then you need to try to figure out if there are deer there, and you do find a lot of good deer signs. You want to try to figure out if there's a deer there that you want to hunt, and you can do that by looking for different types of rut sign. Obviously, the old, the old saying, the old myth that big bucks make big rubs and little bucks make little rubs. That's obviously a myth, but at the end of the day, it does most of the time takes a big buck to make a big rub. So not to say that they don't make little rubs too, but you got to find, there's subtle indications that will let you know whether or not there are mature deer there, just on that initial look at the property. So once you do that, then it's really just kind of a waiting game. You've got to go in there and shed hunt. That's another really good way to determine. And it's not always going to guarantee that that deer lives there or is going to be there, come next fall. But at least it lets you know that there are big deer in the area. And I also like to do late season or post-season trail camera surveys. If you're scouting a property, obviously if it's public land, you wouldn't be able to go in there and put any bait out. But if it's private land, I have done some late season, post-season. And I will say this: make sure you check your state's game laws, because there are a lot of these states that will have a cutoff date for when you can and can't, feed deer. So make sure you check your local state laws on that. But I do like to do late season and post-season trail camera surveys, because that's a pretty good bet of whether or not there's still deer in the area. And like I said, it doesn't guarantee that they'll be there during the early season. It doesn't guarantee that they'll be there during the rut. But I have noticed over the years that if you do find deer in an area during the late season, it's a pretty good bet that they're going to be there come the next late season, because especially if you're able to notice a trend over a couple of years. So there's a number of things that you can do, and I don't think we could fit it all into a podcast here, but those are just kind of the initial things that I kind of do, from initially starting out scouting digitally to getting out onto the property that I am potentially looking to hunt the following season.
Now, how do you catalog all this data? Are you walking around with a GPS or one of the, one of the hunting apps and putting pins down? Okay, here's a rub, here's a rub, here's a crossing. I got 2 trails coming together. Wait a minute, this trail hooking around this hillside, blah, blah, blah. All the things that you've seen. So now, how do we make sure that we catalog that? So when I get back home, I go, oh yeah, I saw that rub. Where was it? Because people do it. I've done it.
Right.
I've gone, oh, I got to remember the spot, and then I don't mark it, and then I'm screwed.
Right. No, absolutely. I'm a little bit of new school and a little bit of old school, I guess. And I'll start out with just purely in the field scouting. Something I've started doing the last few years, and I don't do it every time I go out there, but I try to do it as much as I can, is I like to carry a physical hard copy of an aerial of the property that I'm going out there and scouting during the postseason or late season or whenever it is, even, any time of the year for that matter. But I like to carry a physical hard copy, paper copy of the aerial of that property that I'm actually scouting. And I will, as I'm scouting that property, I will scour it. I will walk every bit of it. I go into it with a shed hunting mentality, where you're zigzagging back and forth, because that's really what it takes to learn a property. You got to go down, walk down one side, go over 50 yards or 40 yards or however much, and come back the other way. And it takes a long time to do stuff like that. And if you've got time, then great. I don't always have time to go that in depth with it. But as I'm scouting those properties, I like to mark anything I find on that aerial map, anything from rubs to scrapes to trails. I'll trace all trails that I find on that aerial map. I will physically mark those on that, and I'll match up my GPS on my phone to the hard copy map. And I will just draw those trails on the map. I have a legend that I kind of keep in the back of my mind and on those maps to identify scrapes, rubs, bedding areas, feeding destinations, areas that I think might be staging areas. Anything I find, I'll even mark what I think is a good stand location on there. So there's water is another big one. I'll mark water sources as well. So that's kind of what I do as I'm in the field. And then once I get back home, I'll log that digitally as well. I've got 3 different apps that I use, and I won't name any names as far as the apps goes, but I've got one app that I use purely for stand locations, marks all of my actual tree stands where they're located in the field, as well as potential stand locations, and I keep those color coded. I also have an app that tracks all of where all of my trail cameras are, because I run about 30 trail cameras in the field each year. And then I have one app where I just like to mark just sign, deer sign. And, you could do all of that in one app, but in my case, or in my experience, it seems like sometimes those apps can get a little bit cluttered if you try to use them for a ton of different things. You can make layers and stuff like that, but I just, I'm OCD, I guess, and so I just like to keep them all separated by app. But anyway, that's kind of what I do digitally. When it comes to trail cameras, I don't delete a trail camera picture. I keep all of I have hundreds of thousands probably of trail camera pictures. I don't know exactly how many I have, but I have a big drive of just photos from trail cameras over the last however many years. And I keep those cataloged pretty in an organized way. I like to, basically the way it stair steps, I have it by year, then I have it broken down by state, then by property, and then within the property I'll have folders for each camera check that I go in and make. So that helps me to kind of identify or go back and look at things that maybe I want to remember from last season, or go back and check from last season. And also something that I do is for each year is I keep a folder for each individual unique buck that I get on camera. And over the years, I've noticed that's kind of helped me learn these whitetails patterns that you wouldn't maybe necessarily pick up on if it wasn't for the fact that you saved all of the trail camera photos. If you didn't save all of the rut sign that you found that you thought was associated with that particular deer, whenever you're able to go back and look at past years for that deer, especially for deer that you have have on camera or see for consecutive years, that can really help paint a picture and really help show you how to potentially target that deer and how to hunt that deer during the upcoming season.
Yeah, you were talking through all that, and I'm going, man, that sounds like a great ebook.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We've written a lot of articles. I've written a lot of articles on these topics on realtree.com. You can find anything I've talked about and way more. You can find an article on it, or multiple articles on it on realtree.com. You can either go to the Deer Hunting Nest, or you can go to my personal blog there, Brow Tines and Backstrap. You can find a lot of stuff in there as well. But yeah, all definitely important topics to consider as a deer hunter.
And folks, just gives you some insight. Somebody that's, one, a successful deer hunter, but two, is honing his craft as a writer in the outdoor industry, and that's available to anybody. Can everybody do it? No, because writing's hard. It's really hard work. It's not easy work at all. But you can still, get your foot in the door and do some things that listeners, just like the listeners to this podcast, I get emails all the time saying, hey, thanks. that one tip helped me close the deal on one of my hit list bucks that he was a phantom buck, and I changed it up. And guess what? Here's a picture of him.
Right.
And that's what it's all about, because we're all out here trying to help each other become better whitetail hunters. And to become a better whitetail hunter, you have to have better deer, especially after mature deer. In the warm up, we were talking, Josh, about, how you got to have a good gene pool, both not only bucks, and then, as you said, the does. So let's talk about that for a little bit, because I think that's right now, people got to understand what's happening to the does that are bred and why it's important to help the does get through the winter.
Yeah, so I'll take a quick step back and real quick. And for those who are fresh into deer hunting or new to deer hunting or have been doing it a while and simply just haven't found the success that they're looking for, I will say this: you're only as good as the ground that you hunt on, as far as big deer goes, and just deer in general for that matter. You can't kill a deer that isn't there. So I will say this: that just because somebody kills a big deer doesn't make them a great hunter. Just because they kill a great deer doesn't mean they're a great hunter. You can take an above average deer hunter and put them on a very poor property, and then take a below average deer hunter and put them on a great property. And the below average hunter, skill wise, is going to kill the big deer most of the time. So I guess my point from that is that you've got to find good ground to kill good deer, and deer in general for that matter. You can't kill a deer that isn't there. And as you were mentioning, the genetics, you've got to find those properties where that genetics is located. You got to find the properties where the habitat harbors those populations of whitetails. And as you also noted, it's not just about having good genetics buck-wise. You've got to have healthy does with good genetics as well, because as we were talking about earlier, the whitetail doe is just as, if probably more, responsible for a whitetail buck and the size of his antlers than the buck is, the sire. So, and then that's because of a number of reasons. A whitetail doe contributes approximately, as approximately 50%, maybe a little more, of the genetic makeup of that rack for starters. And then you got to factor in also the fact that the whitetail doe is the one actually raising that fawn, that whitetail buck fawn, up to maturity, at least not to maturity, but up to a year and a half old, give or take a little bit of time there. So, and as you mentioned, the lactation is a huge factor. The time of the birth, the time at which that doe was bred, is a big factor, whether it's early born or a late born fawn, because there's been a lot of research to show a whitetail buck fawn that gets a late start, so to speak, or a bad start, that has the potential to affect even the subsequent racks each year after that. If his first rack is affected by the conditions it finds itself in, it affects him even, the years following, or can affect even the years following. So it's just one of those things where you got to find the good ground, because if you can't find the good ground with the deer on it, you're not going to be as successful.
So, folks, just to capitalize that, if you've been hunting the same 40 for a number of years, and every once in a while you'll see a decent buck, a 2.5-year-old buck, but most of the bucks you see are young deer, and you never see the mature deer. Well, start figuring out what's on your ground, why it isn't supporting mature deer, or are they completely nocturnal? See, to me, whitetail hunting is 365 days a year at plus. And what I mean by plus, when you're driving to work, I mean, it gets crazy, but you're trying to figure out the puzzle, and it is a puzzle. But if you study the deer, they'll tell you the solutions. Josh, your thoughts?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's just, as we also talked about earlier, when it comes to deer hunting, and it doesn't matter if you're just wanting a doe for the freezer, or if you're wanting to get a big rack for the wall, or both. Even if you're just wanting to take somebody else and get them into the outdoors, whatever the case is, it's really all the same. As we've noted, you're only as good as the ground you hunt. And because of that, I spend way more time each year trying to plan my hunt, plan where I'm going to hunt, and I guess more specifically to that, how to target, because I do a lot of times I will target specific deer. I'm not saying that I won't kill another deer if it walks by me, but I do go into each hunt with a plan to kill a specific deer, because I've found the most success with that. And it seems to me that I slip up less often or spook less deer whenever I go in with a plan to target a specific deer that I think is killable. Um, but at the end of the day, you've got to find those properties that the deer are on, and that takes a lot of time and effort. It's not easy, and I guess, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with just being a meat hunter. There's nothing wrong with just wanting to go out there on open day rifle season and killing whatever you see. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, and you're no lesser of a deer hunter than the guy who spends 200 days of the year scouting. You're just as much of a deer hunter as that guy. But really, what separates the deer hunters from the people who consistently go out and kill big deer on a regular basis are those who are willing to do the homework and put in the time and effort that it takes to be successful like that. And again, nothing against the people who just want to go out on the opening day of rifle season. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And I'm that guy too. I go out on the opening day of rifle season every year, whether I'm the one hunting or I'm taking somebody with me and allowing them to have the hunting experience. But it really does. You have to take the time when you're targeting big deer and you want to just kill, not just big deer, but just to be consistent each year, just to fill the freezer. Sometimes this is what it takes. You have to be willing to go out and do that, do the homework, and make that effort to not only find the good properties, but to learn those properties and then learn the deer that are on those properties. So it really comes in three stages. Big scale, if you want to look at it big scale, you've got to find the right property. You've got to find that property is obviously the first step. You also have to learn that property and figure out how the deer use it. And then once you figure that out, each and every individual deer is different as well. And each and every, it might sound cliche to say it, but every deer has its own personality. It's a lot like humans in that aspect. Every deer has its own habits, its own preferences. And I think that's also where a lot of deer hunters get mixed up. And it's where I personally got mixed up for a long time. And I finally realized, both through mentors who helped me learn the ropes and as well as some things that, I learned for myself, that, every deer is different. And you've really got to go, it's you've got to try to get inside the mind of the deer that you're after. If you're targeting a specific deer, you got to figure out what makes that deer tick. You got to figure out how it thinks, how it behaves, how it reacts, and all the many other factors that play into it. But yeah, definitely, you got to find the right properties. You got to learn those properties, and you got to learn the deer that's on those properties. And if you're willing to do those three things, you'll find a whole lot more success whenever you're targeting whitetails each fall.
Thanks, Josh. And, along the way, there's been a couple of people in your family that's helped you become a hunter that you are today and kind of forge your philosophy, on whitetail hunting. Let's share some stories about those folks.
Well, I mean, I was really blessed. I was born into a family. Not everybody in my family hunts, but I was born into a family with quite a few hunters. And part of that's being a backcountry country boy from Kentucky. There's a lot of deer hunters and turkey hunters and all of the types of hunters living around here. But I'm in a good place, a good part of the country for that, for one. But I was blessed to have a father who introduced me to deer hunting and a grandfather who introduced me to turkey hunting. And now we all do all of it. But back whenever I was little, that my dad's thing was deer hunting, my grandpa's thing was turkey hunting. So I was blessed to have somebody to show me both. And to this day, those are my two favorite types of animals to hunt: whitetails and wild turkeys. I've been blessed with some opportunities to hunt some other things as well. But those are my two passions, and I credit my father and my grandfather for that, getting me into the outdoors as soon as I was able to walk, pretty much, and showing me what those experiences were, and showing me what the outdoors was, and how to enjoy it, and how to not only enjoy it, but how to cherish it, and how to promote that heritage, and how to share it with others. And so I grew up in the outdoors, and that was my thing. Growing up, I played baseball, and that was another passion of mine. But at the end of the day, when it come down to it, if I was choosing over a baseball game or hunting, if I could only do one or the other for the rest of my life, it was obviously going to be hunting. And so that's why I'm where I am today, I guess.
So the second part of that, along the way, you got married.
Yeah.
What happened to your in-laws or with your in-laws?
Well, I was, again, I've had lived a very blessed life, and I thank my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ for that. I thank God for that. But I was blessed to meet my wife at a very early age. I've pretty much known her since we were in diapers, but I think we met in the sandbox. But we started dating when we were 16, and we've been married for a couple of years now. But when I married my wife, I married into a family of non-hunters. They weren't anti-hunters. They didn't have anything against it, obviously. It's hard to be an anti-hunter in South Central Kentucky, But they saw my interest for it, I guess. They saw my passion for it, and they decided they wanted to see what that was all about. And it kind of started with my father-in-law. He was the first one to kind of really inquiry about it, or inquire about it, and he wanted to go deer hunting and turkey hunting. So I did, and I was able to help him get his first deer and his first turkey. I think it was a couple of years ago. Don't quote me on that, but he was the first of my in-laws to decide he wanted to hunt, and just kind of spread from there. I was blessed to get my wife. I was able to get her in the field, and she actually took her first deer, which is that one right there, second one on the wall there. She got her first deer ever during the 2016 season. So she obviously had a pretty good start in the outdoors, killing 120-inch 8-point buck. That's a lot bigger than my first deer. But she really enjoyed it, and she was also able to take her first turkey as well. So she obviously took to the outdoors. And then this past fall, I was able to introduce both my sister-in-law, my wife's sister, and my grandfather-in-law to the outdoors as well. My sister-in-law, she didn't get her deer. She missed one, but that gave her a taste for it, and she's ready to go again in 2018. But what was really cool and probably the highlight of my season, I killed one of my biggest deer ever. It was a 140-inch velvet drop tine buck. Killed it with a bow here in Kentucky during the early season. But the highlight of my season was me being able to take my grandfather-in-law and help him get his first whitetail during the late season here in Kentucky this past season. And the reaction on his face, or the smile on his face, and the reaction he had for that was pretty rewarding for me, and it was a good time. So
when we're talking about, putting deer on the wall and deer in the freezer, what's up with Kentucky? You know, not all of a sudden, you've known there's some big bucks down there, but you're seeing more and more photos of some, hellacious, big bucks.
yeah, I mean it's pretty incredible, and I guess first and foremost I have to credit two things. I have to credit the KDFWR, Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources. They've done an amazing job helping to manage the herd here in Kentucky, because you can go back probably 20 years ago, I'd say, 25 years, anywhere from 20 to 30 years, but probably around 25 years ago, there weren't hardly any deer at all in the area where I hunt at, predominantly. Where I hunt here in South Central Kentucky, there were very, very few whitetails. But due to a lot of the restocking efforts and a lot of the reintroductory efforts that took place, the areas of Kentucky that kind of hadn't seen deer in a long time now have very, very healthy populations of whitetails. And all of the deer that I've hunted here in Kentucky have been mostly in areas where there weren't whitetails or weren't many whitetails for a long time in the late 1900s. So mid to late 1900s, I guess I should say. So it's been great, for one, the management side there from the wildlife agency, but also I have to credit the hunters, because the hunters are managers too. And the deer hunters in Kentucky, especially, I can't speak for every deer hunter out there, but I can speak for those that I hunt with. I can speak with the neighbors that hunt around me and close to me. I can speak for the people that I know. And, here in Kentucky, we take pride in our deer herd. We take pride in the well-being of it. It's not just about killing the deer. It's about taking care of that resource and managing that resource and making sure that it thrives. And, that was obviously a big factor in the whitetail population coming back, was because, the agency can do everything they want to and everything that they can possibly implement. And if the hunters don't accept that and adopt that, then it does not going to be as successful, but it has been because of that. But as far as just in general, looking at the hard data and hard facts, I don't have anything like that in front of me right now. There's a lot of things solid habitat. It's, I've been blessed to hunt quite a few states for deer, turkey, ducks, and waterfowl, stuff like that. And I've I've seen very few places that rivals, if any, that rivals the habitat that we have here throughout much of Kentucky. First and foremost, I would have to contribute that to habitat. Second of all, I'd probably have to attribute it to the agriculture and the abundance of food sources we have here. Because you can have all the genetics in the world, and it's not going to make much difference, or it's not going to make the difference that it would if you don't have the quality habitat and quality food that we have here. So obviously, I have to attribute it to that as well. But again, as I mentioned, genetics is a key thing as well, and we have those here too. Kentucky over the last 10 years, especially, has cranked out some big whitetails. A lot of Boone and Crockett deer. I don't know exactly where we rank right now for all-time Boone and Crockett. I think we're in the top 5. But if you go back 10, 15, 20 years ago, we weren't anywhere close to that. So I would say as far as the rate, and again, I don't have the hard data in front of me. We have written articles on this. You can go to realtree.com and read a lot of data-specific articles that we've written and published in partnership with the Boone and Crockett Club on a lot of the data that they have and research that they have. But one of the big things is I would say, I don't know exactly if it's Kentucky or not, but if we're not the number one, we're right up there at the top as far as the rate of big deer that's being cranked out per state, and not only per state but per square mile. Because that's a better look at, because of the size differential between the states. That's something a lot of people forget about. Kentucky's not a real big state. It's bigger than some, but it's not as big as a lot of states like some of the Midwestern states that crank out big deer every year. So I would say per square mile and even per state, the rate of which Kentucky is cranking out big deer is unprecedented. And if it's not number one, it's right. It's pretty close to it this year in the last couple of years.
Thanks for that. Let's talk about the weather. Sometimes, when it's 100 degrees, not sometimes, when it's 100 degrees and it's July, August, that stresses deer. But then you vert back to your January, February, March, and then when their fawns are dropping, it might be 60 degrees, 55 degrees. What impact do you think that's had on the deer herd in Kentucky?
Well, that's a great point that you make there. Kentucky is blessed for a lot of reasons, as I mentioned: good genetics, good habitat, good agricultural food sources, good natural food sources as well. But a big one is also geographical location. We also have good soil, which kind of relates to the other ones that we've already mentioned. But just the geographical location, as far as the climate goes, we're pretty blessed here in Kentucky. We don't see a whole lot of winter kill, for one. Very few deer do we find that's suspected winter kill. And so they don't. It gets cold here. We've been in the single digits. It's probably been the coldest winter we've experienced in a long time.
Long time.
Yeah, I think it's probably the coldest winter we've had in probably 25, 30 years, I think they were saying. But, on the average, we're pretty blessed here. We don't have a whole lot of cold winters. We don't have those harsh northern cold winters that Iowa or even Kansas, even though they're not really any further north than us, they're colder out there. And we don't have those harsh winters that Nebraska and Kansas and Iowa and Wisconsin, all those other big buck states have. So we're blessed in that regard in the wintertime. We're also blessed in the springtime as well because, as you mentioned, the fawn crop, it's a real temperate climate here and compared to a lot of other big buck states in the country. So that's obviously a big factor. That's a big bonus for us. And what's really good too is, and like I said, I'm no biologist, but just from my personal observations, the fawn drop here in Kentucky, at least on the places where I hunt and monitor it with trail cameras and sightings and stuff like that, and the biologists that I've talked to that work in the area, we're pretty blessed to have a pretty synchronized fawn drop here in Kentucky, which is pretty big because that limits the amount of predation on that fawn crop for the year. As I'm sure the closer that that all the fawns drop, the better, because that means less of them's going to be consumed by predators, by coyotes, by bobcats, whatever the predator is. Black bears. We're black bear population in Kentucky has boomed in the last 5 to 10 years. We're seeing black bears in places where we've never seen them before, at least not in modern history. So, as you mentioned, the fawn crop and all that stuff, we're pretty blessed here in Kentucky too, because we see that synchronized fawn crop for the most part, or fawn drop for the most part. and that's pretty huge because that allows more of those fawns to reach maturity. That means the fawn recruitment rate is higher. And I'm pretty sure the last time I checked the Quality Deer Management Association's data, I think Kentucky is the last state or one of the few states with still to have a fawn recruitment rate over 1.0, one doe per, or one fawn per doe. So that's one of the big successes. And again, I attribute that to good habitat. I attribute that to good management on the agency's part as well as the hunter's part.
Let's touch on realtree reasons for the hunt. We mentioned that in the warm up of the show, Josh. And so let's share with the listeners, what that is and what it accomplishes.
Yeah, no, I'm a primarily an editor and writer. That's my primary duties. But one of my other things I've been tasked with as well by Realtree is to film, produce, and edit a web series called the Realtree's The Reason for the Hunt, and it's really a cool series. And we've had a lot of great positive feedback on it. We've released 4 episodes already. We'll have episode 5 drop this week, and we'll have basically each year we'll have 5 deer episodes. In each season there will be 5 deer episodes, 5 turkey episodes, and some small game stuff mixed in there as well. But one of the cool the episode 4 that was released a couple of weeks ago, it was really probably, as I mentioned, the highlight of my season. I was able to chronicle and my grandfather-in-law's first deer hunt this past season, and he was kind of the centerpiece for episode 4 of that series. And it wasn't just about him though; it was about all of my in-laws who have gotten into the outdoors. It included my wife's first hunt a couple of years ago. It included part of the story from my father-in-law's first deer, but it was really cool because I was able to kind of tell that story of how they were getting it, how they got into the outdoors, and show the experiences that they've had, their first experiences that they've had in the outdoors. And it was pretty cool because, again, I was able to get my grandfather-in-law, who was 74 years old when he killed his first deer this past season, and my father-in-law, my sister-in-law, and my wife. It's just pretty neat being able to get all of them involved.
Now, where would our listeners find that series, please?
Yeah, you can go to either YouTube, Realtree Outdoors YouTube, and you can find the playlist that says Realtree's The Reason for the Hunt. You can find it there. Or you can just go to realtree.com, go to the deer hunting nest, go to the video section of the deer hunting nest, and then you can find all of our videos there that we produce and publish. You can find them all there. So either of those locations, you'd be able to find that series.
Let's talk about the youth recruitment in hunting, because we are, people my age, we're getting older and we're just not hunting anymore. And so we're not getting the recruitment that we need. And here's a gentleman such as yourself that's been successful, very successful in not only making career, but hunting and getting other people involved in hunting. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's crucial. That's absolutely crucial. We have to get people involved with the outdoors, and used to. And I'm just 25 years old, so I can't really say back in the old days. But I've been blessed to hear a lot of stories from my father and my grandfather. They, told me how it was, and I've heard stories from them to understand how things were back in the old days. Calling my dad and my grandpa old men, but it's absolutely important. And as I was saying back in the old days, and really not even the old days, I would say 20 years ago, introducing just your kid to the outdoors was enough. That was enough to keep the heritage alive, and it was really even enough to help the heritage grow. But we're kind of to that point where that's not enough anymore. And we have a lot of the older generations of hunters who are either passing on or just getting older and getting out of hunting, and it's really put a pretty big whipping on the hunter recruitment rates. And so you have to introduce people to the outdoors outside of just the people that are closest to you. Just taking your kid, that's not enough anymore. You got to introduce as many people as you can. Take other people in your family, take your friend, take the guy or girl down the street. Take a kid hunting. And one thing I've been I guess, passionate about is getting people into the outdoors. And honestly, as the wall looks back here behind me with deer on it, and take way more enjoyment out of taking others and seeing them enjoy the outdoors than I do me personally being able to fill a tag.
So what two or three things you'd say, hey, Mr. Smith, or hey, Mrs. Smith, or any of our listeners on the show, what would you say, okay, try these three things to get either your own kids or neighbors' kids, just outdoors. Forget about deer hunting. Just get them outdoors.
Well, I mean, I would say this, first and foremost, and there's nothing wrong with starting somebody out on a deer hunt. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. But my advice is to start somebody out on a small game hunt. Get somebody, especially if it's a young kid. If it's an adult, it's a little bit different. But especially if it's a young kid, it's somebody who maybe doesn't have the patience of an adult or doesn't have the experience or the ability to do it. I would start a lot of people out on small game hunts because it doesn't take as much time and effort to go out and enjoy a rabbit hunt or a squirrel hunt or a bird hunt for that matter as it does a big game hunt. So I would encourage people to start people out in things that may not even be anywhere close to deer hunting. Maybe start them out on a turkey hunt, start them out on a squirrel hunt. What I especially for, and it depends on the personality. Depends on the personality of the individual. But whenever you can start somebody out with something that might have a little more action, because deer hunting can be slow. I kind of relate deer hunting as a slower. It's a chess match, and it's a long chess match. It can be a season long or years long chess match. But when it comes to other type things like squirrel hunting and turkey hunting can be a chess match too, but turkey hunting is a little bit different. There's more action involved. There's more interaction involved, especially when you're calling the birds. Going on a hunt like that can be more productive as far as piquing the interest of that individual because you traditionally see a little more action and you see that action a little bit quicker. So that would probably be the primary thing that I would encourage others and really pay attention to who it is that you're taking. Try to gauge their interest, gauge their interaction and their excitement level. And if you see that they're not having a good time or they're really cold or they want to go back to the house or whatever the case is, don't keep them out there. The goal is to make them a hunter. So if you make that first experience a bad experience, the odds and likelihood of them actually coming back aren't going to be nearly as good.
Yeah, thanks for that. And listeners, use a pop-up line. Don't put a kid, until he's ready up in a two-man stand where, every time they fidget, somebody sees them.
Mm-hmm.
With a pop-up line, I mean, they can go to sleep. They can have their hot chocolate. They can be on their PDA or whatever you want to call it. They can be doing stuff while they're waiting for a turkey to come in or deer to come by or whatever. And that's my 2 cents. A guy shared with that. He said, just Bruce, make it easy for them. And I like how you said, if they get tired and they're sick and tired of what they're doing, get the heck out of there. Just leave.
Great tip. Great tip.
So Josh, let's wrap up the show. What's your one big thing in whitetail hunting that helps you become a better hunter?
Well, I don't know if I could choose one thing, but a couple of things at the front of my mind here from our discussion is, I'm no expert deer hunter. Just because I'm an outdoor writer, editor, I'm definitely not an expert. I've been blessed to learn a whole lot of lessons over the 25 years I've been on here on this earth, in the whitetail woods. But I've had a lot of great mentors who've taught me a lot of great lessons and showed me the ropes. But the best teacher has been the whitetail deer. That's the best teacher that I've found, and the teacher that has taught me the most about the outdoors, about life in general, for that matter. But you can learn a lot of life lessons in the outdoors and in hunting. There's a lot of it that relates to things that aren't just hunting related. So it's just one of those things where, in general, never stop learning. Always try to improve. Never think that that you got it figured out, because just when you think you got it figured out, that's whenever that whitetail is going to show you that you don't have anything figured out, and they can humble you real quick. I'll say that. I've had a really long Ohio season. I hunted up in Ohio after I killed my Kentucky deer during the 2017 season. I didn't fill my tag in Ohio. They whipped me pretty good up there. But, it's just one of those things. In general, never stop learning and always make sure you pay attention. you just really pay attention. And there's a difference between observing and really paying attention to what you see in the outdoors, paying attention to how the deer use the land, paying attention to the whitetail behavior, but really study the deer that you see. Every time you're in the field, really observe those whitetails. And if they do something in the back of your mind, try to figure out why they did that something. Try to figure out why they use this trail and not that trail. Observe the body language that they exhibit as you're observing them in the field. But in general, just that's really my number one topic or tip, I guess I could say off the top of my head. But when you're trying to target big deer, I guess the number one thing that I have learned and realized over the years is understand that every whitetail buck has its own personality, and it has its own identity. It has its own habits, actions, preferences. And those preferences are bedding locations, watering locations, food sources. Not every deer likes the same food. You wouldn't think about that, but not every deer prefers soybeans over corn or corn over soybeans. Every deer is different, and that's really kind of been the big revelation for me over the years, I guess, is learning that every single deer is different. And if you're trying to target a specific deer and you want to kill a specific deer, you've got to figure out what makes that deer tick. And the game plan to kill that deer might be 180 degrees different from another deer that's on the same property. So, I guess that would be the number one thing for me is never stop learning, always observe in the field and that learn that body language and understand that every single deer is different.
Josh Honeycutt of Realtree.com, on behalf of thousands of listeners across North America, this has been a great opportunity. I made some notes myself because I always learned and never stop learning, listeners, because the whitetail buck is a worthy quarry, and they can make you a better hunter every single year. So, Josh, thanks so much.
Thank you, Bruce.
For our next episode, we're heading out to Canton, Ohio, and we're going to connect with Chris Campanelli. Now, Chris is the owner of Affiliate Outdoors. He's an outdoor writer and blogger for Mass Pursuit TV, which is found on the Pursuit channel. He's a deer hunter. He loves chasing turkeys and predators, and he really hones in on land management. So Chris has decided to take all his tools and develop Affiliate Outdoors. He's not affiliated with any company. What he's affiliated with is each one of us. Like we talked about previously on Whitetail Rendezvous, it's about reaching common ground with all hunters, men, women, kids. And as we sit around the campfire talking about hunting, we're all in it together. And we'll deep dive into that quite a bit on the show. But Chris wants to bring some insights that maybe you just haven't heard yet. It's going to be a great show.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, where you can listen and learn from the experts so you can be more successful on your next hunt. Until next time, listen, learn, and succeed.